In this video I want to take a look at the Latter-day Saints, more commonly known as the Mormons, in a little bit of detail. Now, specifically the Book of Mormon that they have is a holy book that a lot of people are going to be familiar with. I want to compare it to the Bible in a number of different ways. This is video 1 of 2. There's a lot of content here, so in this one I'm specifically looking at geography issues. If you look in the back of most of your Bibles, if you've got study Bible or something along that lines, you're going to see stuff in the back, the Bible maps. And you can see some detailed maps, they're colored maps showing the different nations and such to help you kind of wrap your mind around, okay, well, when it says this person went to that city or that town or they traveled to this country, this is what it looked like. So on this particular one that I'm showing you here, you can see Egypt is the area in green. On the east side there in purple is the Chaldeans, and by the Persian Gulf there, and you can see that for this particular moment in time, this is roughly where their borders were. But you can zoom in on that, you can see cities and such, and if we zoom in on the land of Israel, this partial map of the land of Israel shows a number of the cities as well as provinces and boundaries of where the different parts were. And it gets even better than that. If you look at the bottom, you can see Jerusalem faintly there. Well, we can zoom in on Jerusalem. So not only do we know where the nation of Israel existed, not only do we know where the capital of Israel was, we know down to street level details of the capital of Israel, Jerusalem. We can see sort of to the east side there where the temple is, far the west side there's Herod's palace. We can see Gethsemane, we can see Golgotha. There's lots of detail provided there. In fact, it goes down to street levels. You can see individual streets on there, and some of them we know their names. In the south part there in the middle, there's the Herodian Street. We've got a level of detail here which is really stunning, considering it's 2,000 years or more since these events happened. Now, how does that compare to the Book of Mormon? Well, this map is what we might consider a schematic map of one person's interpretation of the Book of Mormon. Geography. Now what they've done is basically they've gone through the Book of Mormon looking only at what the book itself says, and if the book says, oh, such and such a town was fairly close to another town, well, on this schematic map they'll draw them fairly close together. For instance, we've got about 2/3 of the way up the map there's a small or narrow neck of land. And so it might say that a city was north or south of there, so they would draw it at an appropriate place. Now I'm going to be looking specifically at the city of Boaz throughout this presentation. So on this map, the person who drew up this map, looking at the information they had at their disposal, figured it's north of the small or narrow neck of land and a little on the west side, towards the west coast. The question becomes, though, how does this schematic diagram of the Book of Mormon geography actually apply to real geography of the real world? Well, that depends which Mormon you ask. This particular interpretation is what's called the limited geography model. Now basically this assumes that the vast majority of the places and events mentioned in the Book of Mormon happened specifically in Central America. That's more or less where they were limited to. A few events happened outside of that, but more or less everything happened within Central America. That's one interpretation. Here's another one. This interpretation would suggest that the cities and nations that are described in the Book of Mormon were spread out all the way across North, Central, and South America. This is called the hemispherical geography model. This is another map showing another Mormon's interpretation of the hemispherical model. Now on this map you can see on the right side there it says the 2 cities of Boaz in the United States. Well, that's interesting. First, there's 2 cities, not 1. I'm not sure where they got the 2 from, but that's fair enough. If we zoom in, though, we can see that it's pointing somewhere in South Carolina. It's a little bit hard to read, but that says South Carolina, and that looks like 2 lakes there. Well, if you zoom in on Google Maps to take a look at those 2 lakes, you can see which lakes those are. So the question becomes, is that where Boaz was located? Or the 2 cities of Boaz, as the case may be? Well, perhaps it was, or maybe not. See, now we have a number of options in front of us here. We've got the limited geography model, we've got the hemispherical geography model. Now in terms of Boaz specifically, we've got a number of places where it could be. The first schematic map put it north of the small or narrow neck of land and more towards the west side. So that would put it sort of California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah area. Well, this last map we looked at put it somewhere around South Carolina. Well, that's far on the east coast there. And of course, if we're looking just at the limited geography model, well, that puts it somewhere probably in Mexico. Now, you can see that there's quite a bit of variation there. According to the scale on the bottom, it could be plus or minus a few thousand miles. That's no small margin of error there. That's pretty substantial. But the situation actually gets a little bit more interesting if we consider all possible options. You see, I've just looked at two options, the limited geography model and the hemispherical model. But other sincere Mormons who have taken a lot of time to look into this suggest a few other options. Some of them suggest, well, it could have all occurred simply around the Great Lakes in North America there. Okay, well, that still kind of puts it roughly in the same area, but, well, some suggest Africa. There's a couple of people who have suggested, well, maybe all of these events happened in Malaysia. Now, again, these alternate theories are not from non-Mormons. These are not from anti-Mormons trying to make it look difficult. These are sincere Mormons doing their best to understand the evidence at their disposal and trying to interpret it and understand it. Now, I'll grant you that the last two, maybe even the last three there, the Great Lakes one as well, are not taken as seriously in Mormon circles. They tend to put all the events in North America or in South America, Central America, or specifically just in Central America. But the point, though, is that the evidence is ambiguous enough that we might have the wrong continent. Now, I don't want to give the false impression that biblical geography has narrowed down all the information we have to a high degree of certainty on every last little point. There is still some uncertainty that remains, and I think it's very instructive actually if we examine the uncertainty with respect to the biblical geography and compare that to the uncertainty with respect to Book of Mormon geography. Here we've zoomed in specifically to an area around north of and near Jerusalem. You see Jerusalem at the bottom. Now what you'll notice on this map is the town of Arimathea shows up twice. Now there really was only one town of Arimathea, probably. It seems unlikely that they would name two separate towns so close together by the same name. So the question is more likely, which one was it? And you can see based on the scale that's provided with the map that there may be 20, 30 miles apart as the crow flies. So they're fairly close together is the first observation. Second observation is we're given two specific locations. So the issue is not Arimathea could have been somewhere, anywhere around Jerusalem. No, it's either this very specific spot here or it's that other very specific spot there. And those two spots are separated by, like I said, a couple dozen miles, and that's it. Let's look at another example here. Now we've got a couple of towns that are interesting. There's Pithom and Ramses. These are the two store cities that were built by the Israelites when they were under Egyptian rule. This is mentioned in Exodus 1 if you want further details there. Now I got interested in Pithom a while ago and I was looking into that, and it turns out that there is some ambiguity with respect to exactly where Pithom and Ramses are. You can see the question mark behind the two names there. Now there's basically a couple of theories. There's some mounds that have been discovered with ruins underneath them. One of the mounds is referred to as Tel El Mashkuta, and the other one is referred to as Tel Er Rataba. Now those are basically the two options that exist for where Pithom may have been located. Now, how far apart are these? Well, they're just 8.5 miles. So this again is quite similar to the Arimathea ambiguity. It's two specific locations. It's either spot A or spot B, and the scale now has gone actually down from, say, 24 miles down to about 8.5. So they're even closer together than the other one, but that's actually stretching further back in time than Arimathea would have been. So in summary, if we were to compare the differences between the Bible and the Book of Mormon in terms of their geography, well, we could start off by saying that in the Bible, the vast majority has been established. We know the continent on which these events occurred. We know the borders of the different nations. We know how the borders changed with time, with different military activities, conquests, and what have you. We know where the capitals were. We know where a lot of the major cities were, down to street level detail, even in a lot of cases. There is ambiguity, but the ambiguity really comes down to, well, was it this particular ancient ruin over here, or was it that particular ancient ruin? And in many cases, they're very close together, 8.5, 20 miles. You could walk there between the two. That's not that far. Book of Mormon geography is a little bit different. Quite frankly, the big picture itself is completely up for grabs. Whether it's on the North, Central, and South American continent there, the Western Hemisphere, just in Central America, or maybe they've got the wrong hemisphere. I mean, that's a completely different set of uncertainties. So there's a lot of geographical or archaeological ruins and what have you, ancient cities and whatnot, but they don't even have a context within which to begin digesting all of the information, all of the evidence. So the next time a Mormon missionary comes to your door and wants to convince you to believe in the Book of Mormon, maybe you should just ask them to show me the map.